Hi, everybody, and thank you again for joining our biweekly expert series talks. And we are really thrilled to have Dr. Terry L joining us tonight for this discussion. And as per our typical format, we'll have a presentation from Dr. Wahls on dietary and lifestyle approaches to protect your brain, which will be primarily a presentation, a structured presentation, but of course, as it is an interactive, citizen-driven research community, we do encourage you to ask your questions in the chat throughout. At the end of the presentation, we'll open it up to questions and answers. So you can ask anytime. We'll take notes of the questions and we will provide them to Dr. Wahls at the end. And with that, I am going to introduce Dr. Wahls now to join us. Dr. Wahls, Dr. Terry Wahls, is a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa, where she conducts clinical trials. She's also a patient with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which confined her to a tilt-recline wheelchair for 4 years. Dr. Wahls restored her health using a diet and lifestyle program she designed specifically for her brain and now pedals her bike to work each day. She's the author of the Wahls Protocol, How I Beat Progressive MS Using Paleo Principles and Functional Medicine. And the Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles, which is in paperback, and a related cookbook, the Wahls Protocol, Cooking for Life, the revolutionary modern paleo plan to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions. Dr. Wahls conducts clinical trials that test the effect of nutrition and lifestyle interventions to treat MS and other progressive health problems. Learn more about Dr. Wahls' clinical trials at her website, which will be provided in the chat below. And she also teaches the public and medical community about the healing power of the paleo diet and therapeutic lifestyle changes that restore health and vitality to our citizens. She hosts a Wahls Protocol seminar every August where anyone can learn how to implement the protocol with ease and success. And we will post her social following for Facebook and on Twitter as well in the chat. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Terry Wahls. We welcome this opportunity to kind of cross-pollinate, as it were, since we were talking about farm life before, and to learn what you've learned in your study in MS and in related diseases. So we turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, so dietary lifestyle approaches to protect your brain. Here are my disclosures. I've trademarked the various Wahls diet plan, the Wahls protocol. I've published a bunch of books, financial relationships with a variety of entities, and equity in those companies. We're going to go over my story. I'll talk about the MS dietary research. We'll talk about research from my lab, MS exercise recommendations, and in the MS world, which diets have been shown to reduce fatigue, improve quality of life, and what we might do to improve response rates, and a research opportunity. And Christian, you might want to highlight my video so that's what shows up on your recording. Because right now you're highlighted. Before entering medical school, I competed in full contact free sparring. And matter of fact, I got a bronze medal in the trials for the Pan American Games. I had a moderate concussion during that match. When I entered medical school, I thought, okay, I should not be competing where people can kick me in the head for 2 points. I completed medical school residency. Things were going really well. I had a couple of kids. And then in 2000, I developed weakness in my left leg. Saw my neurologist who said this could be bad or really, really bad. And for the next 3 weeks, I go through the workup. And actually, I'm praying for a rapidly fatal diagnosis because I don't want to become disabled. And again, I'd had a episode of visual dimming 13 years earlier. At the MRI, I had a lesion in my spinal cord, one in my brain. I had abnormal spinal fluid. It was consistent with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. And it's an autoimmune disease where the myelin is destroyed in the cranial nerves, spinal cord, and brain. And 10% of people do very well. 10% never have a relapse, but have this progressive decline. 80% have relapsing remitting, and that's what I was diagnosed with. Most relapsing remitting folks will convert to the secondary progressive phase of their illness sometime between the age 45 and 55. Now, I'm diagnosed with relapsing remitting at age 45. So it's probably not surprising. I guess we'll talk about the causes of myelin damage. There's environmental causes. We know if you have a leaky gut, you're more likely to have a leaky blood-brain barrier. And then the immune cells can come in, make the microglia more reactive. There's more inflammatory damage to the myelin. Infection can damage the myelin. And toxins like lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium can also damage the myelin. And the toxins and the inflammation will increase the number of enhancing lesions and the number of relapses and lead to more disability and more resistance to treatment. Very expensive disease. Within 10 years, half will exit the workforce due to fatigue, and 30% will have a gait disability, a cane, walker, or wheelchair. And again, within 10 years of diagnosis, most will have converted to the progressive form of the illness, either with or without relapses. Now, in 2000, you could be treated with an interferon or the decoy protein Copaxone. Once you convert to the progressive phase, then you're given chemotherapy in the form of nivantrone. If you had primary progressive MS, there was no treatment that was available. So I'm going to take a step back here for a moment. Ancient humans separated from other primates about 6 million years ago, and we continued to evolve. The Homo sapiens, our species, was distinct 250,000 years ago. We migrated north to Europe, had a 100,000-year war with the Neanderthals, finally absorbed them, and then we migrate into the Middle East, Asia, Australia, the Pacific Islands, eventually North America, South America. The reality is we thrive with diverse dietary patterns because there are many different foodstuffs in all these different ecosystems, and we had to work really hard for our food. So in 2002, my neurologist mentioned the work of Direct MS Charity in Canada and Lauren Cordain, who had advocated the paleo diet. So after 20 years as a vegetarian, with a lot of prayer and meditation, I read his books, I went back to eating meat. I adopted the paleo diet. I gave up grains, legumes, and dairy. But 3 years later, 3 years after diagnosis, I need a tilt recline wheelchair. And it's clear I'm continuing to decline. But I feel like, well, I don't know how quickly I can recover. Because how long will it take with proper nutrition for my brain and spinal cord to rebuild itself? I didn't know, but at least I was doing something. Now, by 2007, I could not sit up. I had a zero gravity chair like this at home, and another chair like this in my office at work. Unfortunately, I was still mentally clear, so I was still seeing patients through the residence, staffing the resident clinic. I was a member of the Institutional Review Board, reviewing research for the university and the Veteran Affairs Hospital. And during that, I came across a study using electrical stimulation of muscles. So it's not approved to treat MS, but it is approved to treat muscle pain, muscle spasm, disuse, atrophy, and improve range of motion. I asked my physical therapist, could I try that? He gave me a test session. It hurt a lot, but when it's over, I felt really great. He said it's probably the endorphins. And so we added the electrical stimulation of muscles to my little tiny, tiny workout. I could do a little 10-minute floor workout plan before going to work. If I did more than 10 minutes, I just couldn't function. About that same time, I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I took this course on neuroprotection. It was synchronized PowerPoints with the audio lecture and a big notebook of cases. And I had been reading the basic science. I'd been tinkering with supplements to help my mitochondria because I had decided that mitochondrial dysfunction is what drove disability. I had a long list of supplements. I had a longer list of supplements after taking this course. And again, the functional medicine principles In my medical school and my clinical training, I learned how to take signs, symptoms, physical exam findings, and make a diagnosis and treat people. And if I couldn't get them better, I would refer them to an organ-specific specialist. In your case, somebody with neurologic symptoms, I would send them off to the neurologist. The functional medicine folks said, let's work at all the environmental factors. And I really focused on what could I do on exercise and nutrition. And so I reimagined my paleo diet based on all these supplements, and it was stunning. I now had a very organized paleo diet. We wrote up the results because you see, 9 months after starting this very structured paleo diet, adding electrical stimulation of muscles to my physical therapy, I continued this targeted supplements. I was getting stronger. My fatigue resolved, my mental clarity improved. In fact, I start walking again, 2 walking sticks, then 1 walking stick, then no walking sticks. And then in April, so literally 5 months later, I tell my spouse I'd like to try riding my bike, which I hadn't done in 6 years. And she says, well, if things keep going well, we'll try maybe in the fall. 2 weeks later on Mother's Day, I want to try riding my bike. We have an emergency family meeting. And with my son, 16-year-old son, jogging alongside on the left, my 13-year-old daughter jogging alongside on the right, and Jackie following, I biked around the block. And of course, my kids are crying. Jackie's crying. I'm crying. If you could, I still cry, reliving that moment, because that's when I understood that the current understanding of progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete. And it really changes how I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my research. My chief of medicine at the university and my chief of staff at the VA, about a year later, tell me they'd like me to do what's called a safety and feasibility study to test whether or not this protocol I use for my recovery, how it might work for others with progressive MS. And so it's a single arm study. Everybody gets the intervention. We had blinded assessors, and we wanted to know, could other people do what I'd done? Because it was a very complicated regimen. Was it safe? Did we hurt them? And what was the effect on fatigue, quality of life, motor function, mood, thinking, and their blood cholesterol? We asked them to stop processed foods, stop gluten-containing grains, dairy, and eggs. So we were having them emulate the diet that I was following. We stressed 3 cups of green leafy vegetables, 3 cups of deeply pigmented vegetables and fruit, and 3 cups of sulfurs in the cabbage family, onion family, and mushroom family. We encourage grass-fed meat, liver once a week, wild fish according to their budget. We encourage fermented food, seaweed, nutritional yeast, algae. Here's an example, a berry smoothie, big salads. Those were lamb chops, cooked greens, Brussels sprouts. I had to do a analysis of my diet because the review committee was concerned that it was too restrictive. The study diet is in blue. The maroon is the average intake for that nutrient in women between age 50 and 70. So this was the most nutrient-dense diet that the nutritionist had ever analyzed, and I was given permission to do the study. We also gave people methyl B12, methylfolate, vitamin D, and fish oil. And we had some additional supplements, and we told them that these other supplements, if they had any perceived side effects from the supplement, they could discontinue them. So again, a lot of vegetables. We encourage liver once a week, and we taught them a mantra-based meditation, mat exercises, and we taught them how to do electrical stimulation of muscles. Get 20 people. If you're overweight or obese, you lost weight without being hungry. One had to be withdrawn at 6 months because of continued cognitive decline, and that's a known disease course that cognitive decline may occur. People radically changed their diet. They started eating way more vegetables. The 1.5 servings of vegetables and fruit is a typical average American intake. So they got up to about 8 servings a day, and they removed the gluten, dairy, and eggs and kept it out. Now, these people that came in, again, they're all have on average, the average disability level was between cane and walker. So these are seriously disabled folks. They started exercising. And the gray bars, there's a wide variety of just how much exercise they might be doing. But the mean was 10 minutes at the beginning and 20 minutes of mat exercises at the end of the study. And we told people that they could do additional electrical stimulation if they wanted. And so people were doing 50 to 70 minutes of electrical stimulation every day. The bottom line with the red bars is a reduction in fatigue severity scales that's clinically meaningful. It's 2.38 out of a 7-point scale, and a change of more than 0.45 is clinically meaningful. The improvement in general health and energy, which is quality of life measures, the clinical significance there is a change of 5, and those quality of life measures were changing 15 to 17 points. So that's really a quite large quality of life improvement. Anxiety declined, depression declined, and the graph on the right is verbal and nonverbal reasoning also improving. And the associations between avoiding the wrong food, that is the gluten, dairy, and eggs, and eating the recommended foods is the more you ate the vegetables and the more you avoided the wrong foods, you had a better impact on your mood, your reasoning, and your fatigue. And cholesterol improves. Total cholesterol goes down. The triglycerides go down. The HDL triglyceride ratio improves. So the lipids consistently have improved. I give a TED Talk in 2011. My book comes out in 2014. The National MS Society monitors social media. They see this dramatic uptick in conversation about diet and lifestyle after my book comes out. And they make funding dietary research research priorities. And I was encouraged to write a grant for them, which I did, comparing the modified Paleolithic diet and the low saturated fat diet that in the lay public is known as the Wahls diet versus the Swank diet. And it was a 12-week observation period. Then people were randomized. They were trained to either follow the Wahls diet or the Swank diet. They came back in 12 weeks, repeated the assessments, and then came back in another 12 weeks without the support call, so repeated the assessments. So we have 2 assessments during observation and 2 assessments during the intervention. And what I'm showing you is the fatigue was reduced in both arms. And for fatigue severity scale score, statistically, those are equivalent numbers. For the modified fatigue impact scale, a little more sensitive, Wahls is more effective than Swank. For quality of life, both diets improve. Wahls does improve more than Swank. For mental quality of life, both will improve at 24 weeks. Wahls does a little bit better. For the 6-minute walk test, that's how far you can walk in 6 minutes. It doesn't really change at 12 weeks. Very interesting that it does change quite remarkably at 24 weeks. Although statistically, the difference between Swank and Wahls is 0.08, so statistically, they're not different. Simple digit modalities test, which is a measure of your short-term recall, Swank does better at 12 weeks. Wahls and Swank are equivalent at 24 weeks. I think the bottom line, compared to the observation period where all these things were stable, improving your diet leads to improvements in fatigue, quality of life, and for walking endurance if you're on the Wahls diet. Now, the registered dietitians are trained to focus on the dietary guidelines for Americans. And they think anything other than that is a fad diet. And they're worried that the paleo diets will be low in B vitamins because those vitamins are added to white flours, synthetic forms of those vitamins, by the way. And if you exclude eggs, you're going to be decreased in choline. If you exclude dairy, you'll be decreased in calcium. When we've analyzed our diet, the only nutrient that we're consistently low in is calcium. And so we talk to people about using some sort of calcium fortified nut milks or calcium fortified juice. We've done what's called a network meta-analysis, looking at electronic databases to look for diet studies, adults with definitive multiple sclerosis, a diet study that included fatigue or quality of life, and had at least a 4-week intervention. We found 12 studies, 8 different diets. There were 608 participants. We're looking at low-fat, Mediterranean, ketogenic, anti-inflammatory, Paleolithic, and those were our studies. Fasting strategy, calorie restriction, and control or usual diet. So this is the fatigue score. And you'll see that you want to look, the gray box is the mean and the standard deviation. The line is the 95% confidence interval. So to say that something favors the intervention, should have the 95% confidence interval all on the side of the intervention. So here, paleo, low-fat, Mediterranean are favorable for fatigue, with paleo being about 40% more effective than low-fat or Mediterranean. For quality of life, now we have Paleolithic and Mediterranean, with Paleolithic being about twice as effective as Mediterranean. And for mental quality of life, it's Paleolithic and Mediterranean, with paleo being twice as effective as Mediterranean. And here are some of the papers that we've done. So a question I often get asked is, can I just stop my drugs, start your diet? And I say, no, you got to stay on your drugs, because if you stop the drugs that have been working, predictably, you're going to have rebound relapses and be much worse. So in my clinical practice, I want people to have 12 to 36 months of a great response to diet and lifestyle before we attempt to gradually reduce the drug therapy. All diseases begin in the gut, and our gut is necessary to make sure we can digest, absorb our food, so we can grow and repair and have the energy to maintain our health and vitality. If you have an unhealthy microbiome, there's all sorts of problems that happens to our children and problems that will happen to our adults. So the evidence grows that there's a complicated relationship between the microbes in our gut and the health we have as children and the health we have as adults and elderly. We don't fully understand this. Now that we can do big data in microbiome and metabolome analyses, we'll understand this much more thoroughly. So we're growing rapidly, but most of this understanding is in animal models. So more work is going to have to be done. We collect microbiome data in our studies, and we're doing metabolome and big data analysis as well. It's hard to change your diet. The World Health Organization says that when a physician tells a patient to change their diet, only 25% will begin the change. And then of those 25%, 10% will maintain that diet change at 24 months. And we know the standard American diet increases the risk of all sorts of health consequences. It's hard to change our diet because brains are wired for pleasure. We value immediate pleasure over future pleasure, fear of loss over current benefit. And habits are automatic. We crave salt, sugar, fat, and sex. We crave pleasure, comfort, and inactivity. And food addiction is very real. Big food, well, actually, tobacco industry bought up the food industry, and they've used their scientists and food scientists to create addicting products. Withdrawal symptoms will often occur, and changing our diet and lifestyle can be very challenging. The traditional behavior model is inadequate, which is pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparing for action, action, sustaining action, maintenance. Based on my research and my work at the Veteran Affairs, we created a 15-step process, the Wahls Behavior Change Model, based on behavior change science, addiction medicine, functional medicine, evolutionary biology, my clinical practice, in my own healing journey. And we've been very successful. So with minimal testing, we had remarkable transformation. In my clinical trials, 70% of folks have a great response to fatigue, but 30% have not responded. In my clinic at the VA, 20% would not respond well. Was it because of poor adherence? Were there other factors? What if we personalize that intervention? And so you could do that with functional medicine testing, where we look at gluten, food sensitivities, the microbes, the toxin exposures, biotoxins, infections, co-infections, the nutrient levels, the genetics, and then we can have a very specific diet, supplements, and intervention. I have a patient registry where we're looking for people with neurologic conditions, mental health problems. You can register at terrywahls.com/trials so that you'd be part of that database. It could be informed about future clinical trials. This was an example that we have. Subject 3 came in from that first study. It took her 127 seconds to stand, walk 8 feet, turn around, and sit back down. Her fatigue score was 5.6. At 12 months, she was down to 41.8 seconds. It took her, and her fatigue score dropped to 4.4. So a lower number is better. And she was able to climb stairs for the first time, she said 5 years. Subject 11 needed a cane. It took her 14.9 seconds to do the timed up and go walk. Healthy is 6 seconds. Her fatigue score is 5.3. In just 3 months, she drops down to 8.6 seconds, and her fatigue score is 1.4. This person has primary progressive MS. It takes her 21 seconds, two canes. Her fatigue score is quite severe, 6.7. At 3 months, her fatigue score drops to 4.9, and she can do the timed up and go without a cane at 17.6 seconds. And let's see, can I? So that's a subject 3. You can see her stand. She looks a little unsteady. If you watch how her feet are moving, we are chasing with a chair. So if she is fatiguing, she can sit down on the chair again. You see that she's having a hard time lifting her foot. Her foot is she's just dragging it along. So that's her at baseline. And then at 9 months was the first time we could see some improvement. See how much more easily she stands. You can see how she's moving her foot forward. This is subject 11. She stands. She's using the cane. Then at 3 months, see how comfortably she walks with Birkenstocks, by the way. And now she is jogging. And subject 14, 2 walking sticks. He's very stiff. And much more fluid. And there he is without any canes. And primary progressive MS. So remarkably improving. Okay, so the follow me, terrywalls.com/diet to get a one-page summary of the Wahls diet. If you want to register for our patient registry for our clinical trials, terrywalls.com/trials. I'm on Facebook and on Twitter at Terry Wahls. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Terry Wahls. That is really nice because you can see what I'm eating, doing, get a little message from me in the garden. I think people really enjoy that. I will stop my share because that's my last slide. And with that, I think I've left plenty of time for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wall. Yeah, we do have some questions, and I think they're kind of some topics of conversation in general for the cross applicability of what you've been doing to the ALS community as well. So I think we'll dive right in, and I'll be joined here by my friends here, Sylvia and Martha, as we go through this. But the first question was basically a high level one, was that people have read that paleo diet is not necessarily good for people with ALS. Could you speak to what you have,
Well,
what you've seen so far?
so keep in mind, my research is in multiple sclerosis. I have colleagues who are neurologists who do see people with ALS, and they have been using the Wahls protocol, the Wahls paleo diet for those folks. They will also do food sensitivity testing and can give them very specific recommendations on foods to which they be having an abnormal immune response. And this neurologist I'm thinking of will do nutrient level assessments to know, are there nutrients that the persons are low in and that they should follow. I think a ketogenic diet I would definitely not do for an ALS patient because I'm too worried about weight loss. But a diet that is high in sugar, high in white flours, I think is pro-inflammatory and likely to be nutrient poor. If somebody wants to do a Mediterranean diet, I think that would be fine. If somebody wants to do a paleo diet, I would think that would be fine. So if I've had people come to me with ALS, and I put them on either Mediterranean or a paleo diet.
Thank you. Martha, do you want to take the next one? Or Sylvia?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. The next question is, since ALS is different disease than MS, despite both being muscular in nature, what should ALS patients take away from these MS studies and evaluate with their clinicians as therapeutic options?
So if you, I want everyone to go back and look at the presentation. If you think about the environmental factors that contribute to how your cells can do the biology of life. So the quality of nutrition. What can you do to improve your nutrition? To, and eat more of these radical things known as vegetables. Eat more, make sure you have sufficient protein. And to eliminate the sugar, the white flour. And when chewing gets to be difficult, smoothies, soups, and stews would be the recommendation that I would do. Then the other environmental factors. What can you digest and absorb your food? what is going on with your microbiome, and have you developed toxic exposures that should be addressed. Those are the categories that I would recommend people focus on first.
Great. Thank you. Well, another question was, if someone is PEG tubing feed only, how can the paleo diet help an ALS patient? Constant blending or what?
So I've had a large following in the traumatic brain injury clinic, and people who've had traumatic brain injuries who are on tube feeds. In the traditional tube feeds that are blenderized, emulsified, high fructose corn syrup, and vitamins and fats. And when they've switched from the commercial tube feeds to blended soups and stews that are pushed through their feeding tubes, people have found that whole food performed better than the commercial high fructose corn syrup based feeding tubes. Again, you need to find a dietitian with whom to work to help you create a blenderized food plan, whether that's a Mediterranean diet plan or a paleo diet plan. I think either of those diets would be fine. Or even if you did dietary guidelines for Americans. Food is what we need, as opposed to high fructose corn syrup and a white flour based diet.
Thank you. Sylvia, do you want to take the next
Yeah.
one?
So the next question is, can we address the apparent discrepancies between the paleo approach and the higher glycemic index and glycemic load diet being associated with lower or slower disease progression in ALS? It was a study done by it's from Dr. Lee at Columbia.
So I'm not familiar with that study. I will make the observation that in the MS world, every diet intervention, the diet intervention was superior to usual diet. And so there are many diets that have been investigated. I know there's a diet that looked at glycemic load, glycemic index, and that probably reduces or improves insulin sensitivity and improves metabolism. And that has been helpful. There are many diets that will be helpful for people with ALS, with MS, with Parkinson's. And if the common theme is sufficient protein, less sugar, less ultra processed food, so less flour based products.
Is it also possible that the dietary recommendations may be different depending on subtypes of ALS patients?
I can't comment on that. It probably depends on your ability to chew food, whether or not you're having to make different recommendations because it's taking too much energy to chew the food.
And then do you know how would a higher BMI and ALS being beneficial comport with your dietary concept?
Well, if people who are in our studies have lost weight without being hungry, they have lost extracellular fluid, so there's less inflammation, and then they've lost visceral fat. We've not been losing muscle mass.
Thank you. Next question is, did you ever get your dental amalgam fillings removed? And if yes, when during your healing journey did you get them removed?
I did get my dental mercury fillings removed. They were removed. So I was 2 years into my healing journey. I did a 24-hour heavy metals test looking at my urine. I saw that I was diffusely toxic in literally all of the heavy metals except for one. So uranium, thallium, thorium, lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium. It was really quite shocking. I really made some tweaks to my detox protocol. I had a little more seaweed and a variety of other tweaks. Rechecked my 24-hour heavy metals 2 years later, and everything was gone. And then several years after that, I had my I had 4 dental fillings removed. In general, if you want to remove your mercury fillings, you need to go find a dentist who can do that safely, because as you drill out the mercury, you vaporize the mercury, you inhale it, and you're trading a small daily release for a very large single day release. So you may inadvertently make the problem much worse if not done correctly.
Got it. Thank you. Next question, I'll jump in. Do you have any thoughts on ergothioneine for neurological protection?
On what now?
Ergothioneine? Thionine?
Ergothioneine, that's a mushroom compound. There's a lot of great research that the more dietary servings of mushrooms that you have each week, and this is cross-sectional epidemiology, lower rates of anxiety, depression, cognitive decline. We certainly encourage our study participants to eat mushrooms, a lot of them, but you have to be sure that they are culinary mushrooms. Yeah, I don't want just going out into the wild and picking any mushrooms, because there are plenty of poisonous ones as well. Ergothioneine is one of those compounds that is very helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Next
Sylvia.
question is on the study for one of your studies. Why did the person with cognitive decline have to be withdrawn from the study?
Well, it was a requirement from the IRB that if people have cognitive decline and they no longer pass, there's a little screening questionnaire, 5 questions that people have to answer to confirm that they are mentally competent to give consent to be in the study.
Just kill him, that's all.
And so they could no longer pass those 5 questions, and that was a requirement of the committee that oversees the research that we do.
And then another comment was that someone had recently watched the 10th person who essentially completely reversed their MS symptoms on a carnivore zero carbohydrate diet. Do you have any opinion on this?
Well, the carnivore, I have a couple of opinions. We also have people on the paleo diet who have completely reversed their symptoms. It's not unique to the carnivore diet. The conversations I have with the carnivore folks is that they have not ever published a case report or a case series that they have submitted to a peer-reviewed publication. I have reached out to them. I've offered to have my medical students take the medical records and write up those case reports. And for whatever reason, they have not done that. They've raised money, millions, so they say, in order to conduct IRB-approved clinical trials, but there's nothing registered at clinicaltrials.gov yet with the carnivore diet. It may be a very useful elimination diet. I will make the observation that the carnivore folks talk about the lectins in plants to which we can have an immune response, and that for some people, taking out all those plants reduces exposure to lectins, and people, when they don't have that immune response, do very well. They are ignoring the fact that those proteins called lectins are also present in eggs, in milk, in meat, in fish, and poultry. So you can have an abnormal immune response to fish and to meat as well. It may be helpful. I wish that my carnivore colleagues would take the time to write some peer-reviewed publications so we would know who are the people to send to the carnivore diet, how to follow them, and how to determine that people are not responding well.
Thank you. Speaking of responding well, how do your patients who are referred to neurologists fare after entering the new diet?
I don't quite understand the question.
Have you been able to kind of keep follow-up with those referred to neurologists?
Oh yeah, so we certainly have people who come to see me who have a specialist or a neurologist that they follow. And I want all of my patients to continue to have a close relationship with their specialist or neurologist, for their complicated chronic disease, and that I am helping them improve their nutrition and their other environmental factors. There is by no means any kind of adversarial relationship with their specialist care. It's a very collaborative relationship.
The next question is the incidence of MS known to differ based on food culture?
The difference for MS, what we see is the further north you are, the higher the rates of MS. The more westernized the diet, so the more sugar, the more white flour, the more ultra-processed foods, the higher the rates of multiple sclerosis, of schizophrenia, of Parkinson's, of cognitive decline and dementia, of anxiety and depression. I don't know those stats for ALS. I predict they'd be quite similar.
Thank you. What is your opinion of the carnivore diet? I think we just covered that a little bit. So if there are any other additional thoughts regarding the carnivore diet versus paleo, or what else you'd like to?
So the psychiatry folks, some of whom I have great respect for, who take care of people with severe mental health problems, with psychoses, bipolar, schizophrenia, their approach has been to put people on the Mediterranean, put them on the paleo diet first, and many people have resolution of symptoms on the paleo diet. Then they'll do the paleo elimination diet, which is what we did for that Swank versus Wahls study. Then they do the ketogenic diet, and people often get better on the ketogenic diet. And if they don't get better on the ketogenic diet, they would put them on the carnivore diet. And then if they are not getting better, they take carnivore and take away eggs and dairy and just do meat. I have no experience with that approach. So I just find it to be very interesting. They gradually take the standard American diet as about 300 grams of carbs per day. The Mediterranean diet has about 125 grams of carbs per day. The paleo diet that we study has 80 grams of carbs. The ketogenic diet that we study has 35 grams of carbs. The carnivore diet would have 0 grams of carbs, although they do allow for honey. And the carnivore diets that are more restrictive because of an autoimmune problem may also take out eggs and dairy. But again, I have no clinical experience with the carnivore diet.
The next question is, do you know any of the studies showing a strict vegan diet to be associated with an increased risk of neurodegeneration?
I can't comment on that. So I can tell you the pediatricians I know are very concerned if a child is placed on a vegan diet for the risk to the child's neurologic development.
And then the last question is, for those who have listened to your talk today or will on YouTube and now would like to take your recommendations, what are the first few steps that you would recommend for them to successfully start and or maintain, like an elimination diet, a paleo, or a Mediterranean diet?
I would sit down with your family and have a conversation. What would you like to add? So the additions are easier first. So add more non-starchy vegetables. Make sure you're having sufficient protein. And so work at what you're going to add. Then as a family, decide what you're going to reduce and what you're going to eliminate. And whatever you decide, do this as a family. You'll be much more successful. And I encourage people, if you'd like to have a little handout to put on your refrigerator, go to terrywahls.com/diet. It's a great one-page handout to get you started.
Okay. Again, if you've got any more questions from the audience for Dr. Wahls, we have a couple more minutes here left, and we've gone through the questions that we have so far. So by all means, we leave it up to the community to keep the conversation going. And yep, thank you, Dr. Wahls, so far for all the great discussion.
Well,
Right.
come follow me on Instagram. It's lots of fun. You get to see what I'm eating and doing. You get to see my garden. Every week You probably get a couple of my meals. And I try to show a glimpse into my everyday real life.
Thank you. Matthew, did you have a question for the doctor?
I did. My fear balance is I work at New Vivo. I've only been there for 2 weeks. My comments have to be are based on my previous research in multiple sclerosis and non-active secondary progressive. So my comments are very supportive and why I think there's a really good correlation between what you just presented in multiple sclerosis and ALS. So a way of looking at what you presented is when you think of microglial activation, when you think of the innate immunity being fired up, you get massive fatigue. So when you were getting better, if you were affecting the microglia in your brain, you would have seen a really good correlation with fatigue. Based on the last 2 years of my research, the results that you showed, you normally secondary progressive doesn't get better. So that's incredibly remarkable. So I think everyone should know that you don't see people getting
It
up
does
and
not
walking
happen.
better. Right.
And
So that's not random.
and so a lot of in the internet world, people were outraged. They said clearly I could not have had secondary progressive MS. That the physicians, all of my medical team, were incompetent, and they made a misdiagnosis. So we've had 2 trials with others with secondary and primary progressive MS. We're able to show that other people could implement this complicated regimen, and they could walk better. You guys saw the videos. Now, not everyone could walk better, but as a group, their fatigue was remarkably reduced, their cognition remarkably better, the quality of life remarkably better. In others with confirmed progressive MS. And in our clinical practice and in the practitioners I train, this has been replicated in others with progressive MS. And I generally don't take care of people with ALS. I send them to Ken Charlin, who is a functional medicine trained neurologist. He and I collaborate, and he has had remarkable success helping people with ALS. He is much more successful with people who are early in the ALS course as opposed to late. And he's in Springfield, Missouri. Charlin, that's Sharlin.
I just want to offer a correlation because what you've showed for everyone, it does not happen naturally. There are no medicines that are approved for secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. Those results are extraordinary in a very positive way. When you think of ALS, you have the innate immunity, which is also activated. Instead of microglia in the brain, you have macrophages. So I see a strong correlation between what you presented for multiple sclerosis and potentially for ALS. So I'm being very supportive and I'm very intrigued.
I want all of you to feel hopeful and optimistic that it's possible, that we don't know all the answers, but certainly I'd encourage you to have a functional medicine approach to address all the environmental things that you can to create the best environment for your cells, and we'll see what happens. At the worst, you'll slow the disease. At the best, we'll stabilize it, and we may see some level of improvement.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions that came in actually, and
Oh, great.
One specifically in your work with the VA or elsewhere. Do you have any suggestions for stroke survivors?
It's basically the same kind of approach. I would also add electrical stimulation of muscles. That's very helpful for rehab.
Thank you. And one last one, is it possible to do paleo/Mediterranean diet and maintain a big belly, insinuating that the belly is recommended by neurologists to slow down ALS?
Well,
I guess
I think the neurologist. I disagree with the neurologist. I think a diet that is nutrient dense, that has sufficient protein and non-starchy vegetables will be good for you. A diet that is pushing high fructose corn syrup is not good for you.
Thank you.
I
Dave,
think Dave, yes, Dave has raised his hand. Did you want?
Dave Schulman, come on board, Dave.
Hey, thank you for your talk, doctor. This has been super interesting. The high glycemic mentioned earlier was specific to C9 ALS. Dr. Lee at Columbia is the one who's been doing the research. Um, I guess my question would be, knowing that there's like when you think about ALS and the different drivers of it, like C9orf72 repeat expansions is one cause of roughly 1 in 10 ALS patients. There's other genetic drivers, and over time, we're learning about other combinations of genes and/or environmental factors that are driving sporadic ALS. I guess the question would be, is there more research needed to understand what works best for one genetic makeup? Or do you see this as a one size fits all answer to slow ALS?
For whatever underlying neurologic disease someone has, addressing and optimizing your environment will be a good choice. So improving your nutrition, improving sleep, exercising, reducing toxin exposure, understanding your nutrients, and addressing nutritional deficiencies will be helpful. The genetics may tell you that your nutrient needs for a particular nutrient may be higher. So I think addressing environmental factors will be helpful for whatever underlying chronic health problems someone has. And by all means, use the research to guide you. Are there additional specific considerations?
Thank you. We have one more question. Do you know of any studies showing strict vegan diet to be associated with an increased risk of neurodegeneration?
If you have a strict vegan diet, you're certainly at higher rates of potential folate and B12 deficiency, and there may be higher rates of fatty acid insufficiencies. And so pediatricians are very concerned about vegan diets and the neurologic development of children.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think
Folks,
we.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Oh, Rita.
Hi. I would like to know when you did the electrical stimulation, did you use the TENS unit, like two of them at the same?
No, it's not a TENS unit. It's a different kind of device.
Oh, it was.
Yes.
Could you tell us the device?
It's a neuromuscular electrical stimulation device that is not a TENS. So you can talk to a physical therapist who will be trained in both kinds of devices. TENS are for pain. Neuromuscular electrical stimulation is for motor function. It is not a TENS unit.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you to everyone. Any last comments before we tell the doctor how grateful we are?
One very quick one, McFinn. Dr. Wahls, is there any peer-reviewed medical journal where you've been published if we want to read up more?
So if you go to PubMed.gov, you can put in my name and you'll probably see about 50 citations.
Thank you.
Or if you go to terrywalls.com, you'll see there's a link you can sign up to get a link to the videos that I showed and our papers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wahls. Thanks everybody for all your questions and for the robust discussion. And that ends the presentation component of this evening's program. And McFinn, we turn it over to you because at this point, by the way, the recorded part of the discussion ends and it becomes much more the community discussing amongst yourselves. So thanks. And McFinn, it's all yours.
All right, everybody, a fine evening to you. Thank you for having, what do you call that, continuing education. And, you know, we couldn't be more thankful than these doctors who stay up late, who get up early, who sometimes in the middle of the night don't come home because they're on to something. So anytime you can, thank your doctor for the things, just tell them, for everything I don't know that you've done, thank you so very much.